HBO Documentary Films brings us the story of Michelle McNamara's research and investigation into one of the most infamous criminal cases in California. I'll Be Gone in the Dark takes us on the journey to find the perpetrator, who is known as EAR, ONS, and GSK. True crime writer Michelle McNamara did an amazing amount of dogged research, looking into the cases of sexual assault and murder that occurred throughout California from 1974 to 1986. For years, the perp was known as EARONS or GSK, and those are acronyms that are well known for longtime residents of California. They stand for the East Area Rapist, or the Original Night Stalker, or finally, the Golden State Killer. The documentary has audio from McNamara as she does her research and as she goes about interviewing just all kinds of people for her book. She talks with detectives, social workers, survivors, and other crime researchers, all in an effort to really get a well-rounded story, to really get into all of the details. I mean, she leaves no stone unturned. She is a detective just like none other. I mean, she is going for it. She has her nose on the story and she wants to solve it. And you see her relentless pursuit. If you don't know, Michelle McNamara was the wife of Patton Oswalt, who was and is a huge supporter of hers. Unfortunately, she passed away before the book could be finished from some drug interactions. The documentary is really touching in a lot of ways because it shows Michelle not only as her researcher and detective side, but also as a wife and a mom. I mean, we get a great picture of who she was, and the documentary uses her words to really draw the picture of what just sucked her in to these true crime cases, why she felt the need to want to help to solve them. I mean, it also, from her own words, it gives us a good picture of why she's as good as she is. As a Northern California resident, I grew up knowing about these cases. Curiously enough, though, I grew up in Rancho Cordova, where EARONS was attacking and perpetrating his crimes. I mean, I went to the elementary school, the junior high, the high school that is right next to a lot of the streets where he was just doing his thing. And my wife lived on a street where the attacks happened on the street behind her. So we grew up in this neighborhood knowing about the East Area Rapist. And then as a child of the 70s and 80s, I mean, that left its stain on the community of Rancho Cordova and Citrus Heights and Arden Arcade and all of the surrounding areas right there in this East Sacramento area. It kept the people on edge, and because they didn't know where he was, they didn't know how to catch him, and his crimes were terrible. And I'm quite certain that the feelings that Rancho Cordova was experiencing, all the other communities up and down the state were feeling that way as well as he moved to different locations. But see, as a kid, I wasn't aware of all of those other crimes that were happening or had happened. I only knew about what was in my little microcosm of Rancho Cordova. The documentary plays out pretty much chronologically, and so we get to see the background of Michelle and why and what drew her to the EARONS case. And just as she dove in, and even some of the cases that she worked on before, and how she went about her career, and how she became successful in that career, and then what ultimately got her hooked on this particular case. The story is a terrifyingly true tale, and it's really horrible to hear about how he went about his crimes. It's heartbreaking to see and hear the interviews with the survivors. I mean, they are super strong for being able to stand up and to share their story with the world. But don't get me wrong, the stories, the reenactments, they're devastating to listen to and to hear described, and they don't totally act out in the reenactments. It's more of just some imagery with voiceover, so it kind of gives you a setting. It's not like some cheesy 48 hours reenactment where you can just tell it's all just kind of staged and it doesn't really add anything to the story. This is more hearing it from the survivors, hearing their words spoken, and then also with Michelle's writing and her narration, just building this huge story. Now, one of the final chapters in the story made national news very recently, and you probably heard about it. But if you didn't, I'm not going to spoil it for you. I want you to be able to just experience the entire documentary as it plays out so that you get you're on for the ride just like I was. I'm not usually thrilled with weekly releases of episodes in a series. I prefer to binge them all at once. But in this case, I'm glad that it did come out weekly, because what that did is it allowed the filmmakers to insert current events into the final episode. Now, unfortunately, Michelle died before her book was totally completed, and so it didn't necessarily have all of the information. Well, it certainly didn't have all of the information that we have today. But I'm glad that her work led to the current events of today. It's 6 episodes, and each of them are about an hour. And now that the entire series has aired, you can sit down and binge them all in one sitting, which is really probably the more enjoyable way to do it, because there are a couple of weeks where it was like, really? You're ending there? That's it? And I think even the first episode, if I'm remembering back to when it first aired, when they ended, I went, what? No, no, no. I need episode 2 right now. That's not a good place to stop. Well, it is a good place to stop if you're leaving it on a cliffhanger, but for those of us who didn't want the cliffhanger and just wanted more of the story, that was mean. The final episode is very touching for a number of reasons, and it's a really good cap to the entire series. I highly recommend checking out I'll Be Gone in the Dark. It's on HBO. It's a documentary films presentation, and it is definitely worth the 6 hours that you will spend to binge watch it, especially if you're a true crime fan. But it is heavy. I mean, the content, you can't get around what it's surrounding, and so it is tough, but it's so worth it. There's no sex or nudity, but there is a lot of profanity and some terrible descriptions of sexual violence. Have you read I'll Be Gone in the Dark? I'm curious what you thought of the novel. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for catching with me.